will never forget the day a full-grown gorilla appeared at the main entrance of our wildlife sanctuary. The moment people saw his massive figure near the gate, panic rippled through the crowd. Visitors froze. Guards reached for their radios. Everyone assumed the same thing, an escape. But they were wrong. This powerful animal was not running from captivity. He was looking for someone. He was searching for the man who had once saved his life 12 years earlier. And when he finally found that man, what happened next would move millions of people around the world to tears. But before that moment ever came to pass, there was a beginning. And that beginning was painful beyond words. Everything started with a loss. On a freezing winter morning in the year 2013, the veterinary wing of the wildlife sanctuary felt strangely quiet. Too quiet. As the staff carried out their routine morning rounds, a faint wheezing sound drifted out from a back room. The sound was weak, barely noticeable, but it was enough to make my heart tighten instantly. I am Dr. Sarah Klein, a senior veterinarian at the sanctuary, and I knew immediately that something was terribly wrong. A pregnant female gorilla from a newly arrived group from Africa had likely gone into labor overnight. My steps quickened as I moved toward her enclosure, already bracing myself for what I might find. Nothing could have prepared me for the sight. The mother gorilla lay completely still on the cold floor. Her massive body showed no sign of movement. Beside her, curled against her side, was a newborn baby gorilla, bare, trembling, and impossibly small. My chest ached as I realized the truth. The mother was gone. The team rushed in without hesitation. There was nothing we could do for her. But the infant, this tiny, fragile life, was still breathing when I gently touched its chest. Its eyes were sealed shut. Its body weighed less than 1 kilogram. Its skin felt icy beneath my fingers. The odds of survival were estimated at 5%, maybe even less. But giving up was not an option. I wrapped the baby in a warm blanket, cradled it against my chest, and ran toward the emergency care room. As I burst through the door, I noticed someone else already inside. An elderly man sat quietly in a wheelchair near the wall. His name was David Bradley. David Bradley was one of the sanctuary's quiet legends. For 4 decades, he had worked here as a veterinary technician. He had helped save thousands of animals. He had stayed late nights, missed holidays, given everything he had. Then a devastating car accident had changed his life forever, leaving him unable to walk. Forced into retirement, David could have stayed home, but he chose not to. Every single morning, he arrived in his wheelchair and volunteered at the veterinary center. His hands were weaker now, his body slower, but his heart was as gentle and devoted as it had ever been. I approached him with the baby still clutched to me, my voice shaking as I spoke. "Uncle David," I said softly, "this baby needs more than food. It needs to trust someone. It needs a reason to keep fighting. I cannot do this alone. Can you help me?" David did not hesitate. He extended his weathered hands toward me. I carefully placed the tiny gorilla into his lap. David looked down at the baby, his eyes filling with emotion. The infant's eyes remained closed, but the instant it felt David's warmth, its tiny fingers twitched. Then, slowly, they wrapped around one of his fingers. That moment changed everything. That quiet, wordless instant was when a bond was formed. "What should we call him?" David asked, his voice rough with emotion. I smiled through my tears. "Hope," I said. "We will call him Caleb." From that day forward, David arrived at the sanctuary every morning at 7 o'clock sharp. He wheeled himself directly to Caleb's special care area and stayed there for nearly 10 hours a day. The early weeks were brutal. Caleb needed to be fed a specialized formula every 2 hours. David held the bottle patiently, whispering to him in a voice that sounded more like a lullaby than speech. When Caleb was too weak to drink, David did not stop. He waited. He tried again. And again. While the baby slept, wrapped snugly in blankets on David's lap, David told him stories. Stories from his childhood. Stories about growing up on a farm. Stories about the first injured fox he had ever rescued all those years ago. 1 month later, Caleb opened his eyes for the first time. The first face he truly saw was David's, wrinkled, tired, and overflowing with love. The first voice he recognized was David's. When he heard it, he turned his tiny head toward the sound. The first time he tried to stand, he clung to David's knee for balance. All of us watched this miracle unfold day after day. Caleb was not merely surviving. He was thriving. He was growing stronger. And he was forming an unbreakable bond with David. Still, we all understood the truth. No matter how much love a baby gorilla received from a human, one day he would have to join his own kind. A human could never replace a mother, but a human could become a bridge. David understood this better than anyone. Every morning when he lifted Caleb into his arms, he knew this chapter would eventually come to an end. Yet he never let that shadow steal the joy of the present moment. Because in that moment, Caleb was safe. He was warm. He was loved. And for David, that was enough. Months passed. Caleb reached a weight of 2.5 kilograms. He learned to leap from one lap to another. He developed a love for mashed bananas. He turned stealing David's glasses into his favorite game. And David laughed. He laughed in a way he had not laughed in years. Not politely, not quietly, but deeply, from somewhere far inside his soul. Caleb was no longer just an animal to him. He was family. Caleb gave him something he thought he had lost forever: purpose. After those long, painful months following the accident, when the wheelchair became a permanent part of his life, David felt invisible, forgotten, useless. But now, because of Caleb, he felt needed again. He mattered to someone. And that someone, a tiny, furry life, looked at him as if David were the center of the universe, as if the sun itself rose and set for him. 10 months later, the moment David had been dreading finally arrived. When I walked into David's room that morning, I was holding an official document in my hands. I already knew what it said, and I hated every word of it. "David," I began gently, "you know Caleb is growing fast. He weighs 7 kilograms now. He is healthy. He is strong. It is time for him to move to the Gorilla Tropics exhibit. The group there is ready to accept him. This is what is best for him." David nodded slowly. He had always known this day would come. He had known it from the very beginning, but knowing did not make it hurt any less. "When?" he asked quietly. "Tomorrow," I answered. That night, David did not go home. He stayed at the veterinary center, sitting in his wheelchair beside Caleb's enclosure. Caleb slept peacefully in his lap, wrapped in blankets, unaware that everything was about to change. David looked down at him for a long time, memorizing every detail. He gently stroked Caleb's small forehead with one finger. "You are going to be strong, little guy," he whispered. "You are going to live. You are going to be happy. And maybe one day you will remember me. Or maybe you will not. That is okay. What matters is that you are safe." The next morning, David was nowhere to be found. When the veterinary team arrived to transfer Caleb, David had positioned himself far away, hidden in a quiet corner of the sanctuary. He did not want to see the separation. He knew his heart would not survive it. As Caleb was carried toward his new home, he turned his head one last time. His small eyes scanned the room. He was searching, looking for something, looking for someone, but that person was not there. And believing he would never see him again, Caleb was taken to his new enclosure. But this story does not end there. In truth, it is only the beginning. Because a real bond does not fade with time or distance. And 12 years later, Caleb would prove that to the entire world. 12 years is a long time. People change, animals grow, memories blur. At least, that is what we tell ourselves. But sometimes, rarely, something remains untouched by time. The heart remembers. On a hot summer morning in the year 2025, The wildlife sanctuary was as busy as ever. Families walked through the grounds. Children pointed excitedly. Tourists raised their cameras. The Gorilla Tropics exhibit was, as always, one of the most popular attractions. Behind a thick glass barrier lived a magnificent group of gorillas, and among them was Caleb. Now 12 years old, he weighed 180 kilograms. His muscles were solid as stone. His dark fur shone in the sunlight. He was not the alpha male, but he was deeply respected. Calm, powerful, never aggressive. The staff admired him. Visitors loved watching him, but no one knew that something inside him felt incomplete. Every day followed the same routine. He woke up, joined the group, ate, rested, slept. But sometimes, only sometimes, he would move to a corner of the enclosure and stare outward. He did not know what he was waiting for. A smell, a sound, a feeling, something, and it never came. That morning was meant to be just another ordinary day, until 11 o'clock. One of our technicians, James, was inspecting the side door of Caleb's enclosure when he noticed the latch was old and rusted. Just then, his cell phone rang. For a brief moment, his attention drifted. He pushed the latch closed, assuming it had locked properly. It had not. The door remained open by the smallest margin, barely a millimeter. Caleb noticed. Gorillas are intelligent animals, and Caleb was especially observant. As he moved through the enclosure, he caught sight of the gap from the corner of his eye. The other gorillas were resting, quiet, calm. Slowly, instinct guiding him, Caleb approached the door. He placed one massive finger into the opening and applied gentle pressure. The door opened without a sound. Caleb paused. Something stirred deep inside him. It was not just freedom. It was a pull, a calling, a memory trying to surface. And then he stepped outside. At first, no one noticed. Caleb walked onto the grass. The visitor pathway was close. A child spotted him. "Mom," the child said, "why is that gorilla outside?" The mother turned, her eyes widened, and she screamed. Panic exploded across the area. People ran, shouted, grabbed their children. An emergency announcement echoed through the loudspeakers. "Escaped animal at Gorilla Tropics. All visitors proceed immediately to safe zones." Security teams rushed in with tranquilizer equipment. But Caleb was not escaping. He was running, with purpose. He was heading toward the main gate. The main gate was a wide, open space. That was where tickets were sold, where information desks stood, where visitors gathered. That day, it was pure chaos. But one person there was completely calm. One man sat quietly in a wheelchair. David Bradley. Now 72 years old, his hair had turned completely white. As the years passed, David's hands began to tremble more noticeably. Age was catching up with him. Still, every single week, twice a week, he came to the sanctuary without fail. He could no longer help inside the veterinary center. Even short tasks exhausted him now. So instead, he sat near the main gate with a cup of coffee, watching people come and go. He had made a painful choice to distance himself from the animals, especially from the gorillas. The few times he had walked past the Gorilla Tropics exhibit and caught a glimpse of that large, magnificent male from afar, something inside his chest had twisted unbearably. He did not recognize that powerful gorilla as the tiny baby he once held. And yet, deep down, a strange feeling stirred every time he saw him. That feeling hurt too much. So David stayed away. But on that morning, when everything unraveled, David was there at the main gate, sitting quietly in his wheelchair. Then the loudspeaker crackled to life. "Attention! An escaped gorilla is moving toward the main gate. All visitors must take immediate shelter inside the buildings." Security guards rushed toward David. "Mr. Bradley, we need to get you inside right now," one of them said urgently. David nodded, but he did not move. As they reached for his wheelchair, a massive shadow appeared along the main pathway. A gorilla, running, powerful. Caleb. The guards froze in place. But Caleb did not charge. He did not roar. Instead, he stopped in the open space near the gate. He lifted his head and drew in a long, deep breath. Slowly, deliberately, he turned his head, scanning the crowd, and then his eyes found an elderly man sitting in a wheelchair. In that instant, Caleb's world came to a halt. That scent, that presence, that feeling. It had vanished 12 years earlier, and now, somehow, it was here again. Caleb began to walk forward, slowly. The security guards backed away, weapons raised but unused. The gorilla showed no aggression, none at all. He was not attacking. He was approaching. David sat perfectly still. Tears streamed down his face. His lips trembled. He knew. Somehow, impossibly, he knew. Caleb stopped 2 meters in front of him. Then the massive gorilla lowered his head and made a sound, soft, low, and unmistakably familiar. The sound baby gorillas make when they call for comfort. David lifted his shaking hand into the air. For a moment, his fingers hovered. Then Caleb leaned forward and gently pressed his forehead into David's hand. Silence fell over the entire sanctuary. The chaos vanished. The shouting stopped. Every person at the gate stood frozen, watching. This was not fear. This was something else. Something sacred. David placed a finger against Caleb's forehead, just as he had done so many years ago, and whispered through tears, "My little guy, you remembered me." Caleb closed his eyes. In that moment, he found what he had been searching for his entire life. Peace, home, trust, love. Then, slowly, Caleb stepped back. The security team carefully guided him away and returned him to his enclosure. Before disappearing, Caleb turned his head one last time and looked at David. David raised his hand and waved. "Goodbye, son," he whispered. That same day, a video spread across social media like wildfire. A gorilla running through a crowd, stopping in front of a man in a wheelchair. 2 souls reconnecting after 12 years. Millions watched. Millions cried. But the most painful chapter of this story was still ahead. 2 weeks after the reunion, David went to the hospital for what he believed was a routine checkup. It was not. The doctors spoke gently, but their words were final. Advanced pancreatic cancer. Very few treatment options. 6 months, perhaps less. David was not shocked. He was 72 years old. He had lived fully. He had helped countless animals. He had loved deeply. He was not afraid of dying. There was only one thing that broke his heart. He would not get to see Caleb again. One reunion was not enough. When David left the hospital, he did not go home. He went straight to the sanctuary. When he entered the office of the sanctuary director, Linda Martinez, she understood immediately. She saw it in his face. David sat quietly for a moment before speaking. "Linda," he said softly, "can you do me one last favor?" She placed her hand over his. "I will do anything, Uncle David. Just tell me." David looked up, his eyes shining with emotion. "I need to see Caleb again. Not just once. Many times. My time is running out." He swallowed hard. "I carried that baby in my arms for 10 months. I helped give him life. Now that I am leaving, I want to spend what little time I have left with him. Is that possible?" Tears filled Linda's eyes. "Yes," she said without hesitation. "It is possible. I promise you. I will make it happen." After the viral video, the story of David and Caleb had captured the world's attention. Documentaries were produced. Interviews were requested. But Linda knew the truth. This was not just a beautiful story. This was a rare, unbreakable bond. And time was slipping away. She made a decision. A special room was prepared inside the veterinary center. A safe space, divided by reinforced glass, close enough to see, to feel, to connect. Special permission was granted. 3 days a week. 1 hour each time. Caleb would be brought to that room. David would be waiting. But there was one concern. Would Caleb accept it? That first reunion at the gate had been instinctive. A moment. Now this would be ongoing. The veterinary team planned every detail carefully. Caleb would be moved slowly, calmly, without fear. The first visit was critical. If Caleb panicked, everything would end. When David entered the room for the first time, tears streamed down his face, tears of joy and grief intertwined. The space was simple, quiet, peaceful. A large glass wall separated them, comfortable seating on both sides. David's wheelchair was positioned close to the glass. Linda leaned down beside him. "Uncle David," she whispered, "Caleb will be here soon. Are you ready?" David nodded. "I have never been this ready in my entire life." The door opened, and Caleb stepped inside. The team had done everything right. He was calm. He was not afraid. When Caleb stepped into the room, he lifted his head immediately and drew in a long breath. That scent, that familiar presence. He turned and saw David on the other side of the glass partition. Without hesitation, Caleb walked straight toward him. He placed his large hand against the glass. David raised his own trembling hand and pressed it to the same spot. Two hands met through the glass. Two hearts ignored the barrier between them. That first visit lasted 1 full hour. David spoke the entire time. Caleb listened. Sometimes he made those soft, low sounds, the same sounds baby gorillas make when they feel safe. David smiled through his tears. "You remembered me, didn't you, my boy?" he whispered. Caleb rested his head against the glass and fell asleep. David watched him, tears flowing freely. But this time, they were not tears of pain. They were tears of joy. The next 3 months became both the most beautiful and the most heartbreaking period of David's life. Every week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 2 o'clock, David and Caleb met in that room. David talked non-stop. He spoke about his childhood, his first love, his wife, the farm where he grew up, and the life he had lived. Caleb listened. He lay with his head against the glass, eyes half closed, absorbing David's voice. Sometimes he slept. Sometimes he followed David's hand with his eyes. But always, he wanted to be there. The staff noticed it too. When it was time for the visit, Caleb waited by the door of his enclosure as if he knew the hour, as if instinct guided him. And when the visit ended, he resisted leaving. He never became aggressive, but he clearly did not want to go. Still, he waited patiently for the next meeting. David, meanwhile, was growing weaker. He lost weight rapidly. Sitting in his wheelchair became difficult. He relied on pain medication. His speech slowed, but he never missed a single visit. Linda once gently suggested canceling. "Uncle David, if you are too tired, we can skip today." David laughed softly. "Tired," he said. "I have never felt more alive. He is waiting for me, and I am waiting for him. How could I stay away?" One day, David brought something with him, an old, faded small blanket. Linda recognized it instantly. "Isn't that the blanket from 12 years ago?" David nodded. "The first blanket I wrapped him in. I kept it. I thought one day I might need it." He paused. "Now I want him to have it." The blanket was carefully examined and then placed inside Caleb's enclosure. When Caleb saw it, he approached slowly, smelled it, and then lay down on it, curling his body around it as if he remembered. As summer turned into August, David's condition worsened. Hospitalization became necessary. David refused. "No hospitals," he said firmly. "I will stay at home, and I will keep seeing Caleb." The doctors warned him, but he would not listen. "I will not spend my last days surrounded by the smell of antiseptic," he said. "I will spend them surrounded by animals." Linda arranged a special ambulance service. David would be brought from his home to the sanctuary and returned afterward. It was exhausting. It was risky, but it was worth everything. Every time David saw Caleb, it was as if life flowed back into him. David's final visit came at the end of September. He was painfully thin now. His voice was barely a whisper, but his eyes were still clear, still full of love. When Linda wheeled him into the room, Caleb was already waiting by the glass. The moment he saw David, Caleb let out a soft, mournful sound, low and trembling, as if he understood. David placed his hand against the glass. Caleb mirrored him. "My little guy," David whispered, "I was always proud of you. You are strong. You will live. I am leaving now, but you will stay. You will be happy. Be happy for me." Caleb rested his head against the glass. He did not close his eyes. He stared at David, unmoving, as if he understood that this was goodbye. When David was wheeled away, Caleb watched him for a long time. He made a deep, sorrowful sound, one none of us had ever heard before. David did not look back. 3 days later, David Bradley passed away peacefully in his sleep at home. The news reached the sanctuary that morning. Linda cried. The veterinarians cried. We all cried. But none of us knew how to explain it to Caleb. When visiting time arrived and the team went to bring him to the room, Caleb was sitting in the corner of his enclosure, resting on the old blanket, staring outward. He refused to move. There was no forcing him. Animals sense absence. They sense loss. Caleb knew. From that day on, he changed. He stopped eating. He avoided the group. He stayed by the blanket. He grew thinner with each passing day. The veterinarians tried everything, but Caleb resisted all examinations. He wanted only one thing: to wait. His gaze never stopped searching for the same place, the glass room, the scent, the man. On the last morning of October, during routine checks, we found Caleb motionless. We ran to him, but it was too late. He lay peacefully on the faded blanket, eyes closed. They recorded the cause as heart failure, but we knew the truth. This was not heart failure. This was a heart that refused to go on without the one it loved. The sanctuary built a monument near the main gate, a bronze statue of a man in a wheelchair, a gorilla leaning gently against him. The inscription reads, "Love knows no boundaries, no species, no time. David Bradley and Caleb. 2 hearts, 1 bond. Forever." Every day, visitors stop there. They take pictures, they cry, and they tell their children what real love is: loyalty, devotion, and never forgetting.